When I drove the Omoda C9 Turbo about a year ago, what I did say is that car needs to learn how to be a bit more fuel efficient. Now, this plug-in hybrid is more fuel efficient, while also offering more than 500 PS. Now, Omoda Jayco has been getting quite a lot of attention because of its super hybrid plug-in hybrid systems, which the Omoda C9 also utilizes. So up front, instead of the 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine we used to get, we now get a 1.5-litre turbocharged 4-cylinder. Now that engine alone produces 143 PS and 215 Newton meters of torque. However, up front, it is actually mated to no less than 2 electric motors. One producing 102 PS and 170 Newton meters as its own sort of starter generator, whereas the traction motor, the one that actually powers the front wheels, produces 122 PS and 220 Newton meters of torque. However, in addition to that, there is also an electric motor at the rear, giving this car electric or electronic all-wheel drive. That motor produces 238 PS and 310 Newton meters all on its own, which gives this car a total combined power output of 537 PS and 650 Newton meters of torque, enabling this car to go from 0 to 100 in 4.9 seconds. Now, powering a lot of this firepower is the electric battery that lives between the front wheels, which measures in at 34.46 kilowatt hours. It's an LFP unit, and it can accept up to 70 kilowatt DC charging, allowing this car to go from 30 to 80% in 25 minutes. In terms of AC charging, this car will accept up to 6.6 kilowatts. Now, on a home charger at 6.6 kilowatts, it means that this car will take about 6 and a bit hours to charge from dead to full. However, if you were to use a 3-pin plug, then you're looking at about 15 hours to fully charge the vehicle. That said, fully charging the car will give you a WLTP rated range of 145 kilometers on battery power alone, which means that the Omoda C9 PHEV is more than capable of driving through maybe 1 or 2 days of you going to and from work daily without needing to recharge, which means that this car should be very fuel efficient, which is part of the reason why this car also comes with a pressurized fuel tank in order to ensure that even if the fuel stays in there for 6 to 9 months, it shouldn't go stale. Now, in terms of the exterior design, the Omoda C9 PHEV is identical to the non-plug-in hybrid version, except for one key difference. I'll leave you a little bit of time to see if you can spot what that difference is. Now, in terms of shared elements, this car gets the same Sigma daytime running light signature, which stretches from here all the way up into the full LED headlights, replete with automatic high beam. There's also a light bar here, which comes on with the positioning lights, which again unifies this overall design. But this silver satin chrome blade that goes from one end to the other does do a pretty good job of giving this car, again, a very unified face, even when the light bar is off. You have no fog lights. Instead, you sort of get these elements here, which look like air breathers, but they actually do nothing. You also get this nicely integrated grille here, which I think does look quite good. But the sole visual differentiator between the C9 PHEV and the C9 Turbo is this bit of dark gray material here. These elements that frame the centrally mounted millimeter wave radar is the only way you can tell from the outside that this is the plug-in hybrid model compared to the Turbo, because the Turbo doesn't have that. Now, in terms of the visual appeal of this vehicle, or in terms of exterior specifications, it's actually shared with the Omoda C9 all-wheel drive, which means that in terms of rolling stock, you get identical 20-inch alloy wheels wrapped in Michelin E Primacy tires with a diamond cut finish on the front and a Omoda badging in the middle. I appreciate the fact that Omoda Jayco has not sought to try and cheap out with the tires here, because this is a very powerful vehicle, in fact the most powerful vehicle that they presently produce, which means that you do need good rubber to be able to transmit that power to the ground and keep everything in check, particularly given the fact this car weighs well north of 2.3 tons. Now, in terms of overall design aesthetics and features and stuff down the side, you do get a set of functional roof rails, although I don't think anyone will ever use them. You get these Range Rover Velar inspired elements here, and you do get a little bit of contrast cladding down there. You get an NFC card reader up here should you so want it, and just like the Omoda C9 Turbo, you also get flush fitting door handles, which means that when the car is locked, it does sit flush with the bodywork. I'm not sure what was going on in there, but it was making some kind of noise to welcome me. Now, because the Omoda C9 is an Omoda, that's one of the reasons why this car has a very coupe-like roofline, where, as you can see, the roof kind of tapers down here to a very gentle gradient back here. And that's also why this car has a very muscular line that goes from the headlights all the way to the taillights, to make this car look a little bit more athletic, a little bit more sporty, a little bit more hunkered down. And I do think the side profile is pretty good looking. In fact, most of this car is quite good looking. And that actually extends to the rear. Now, as you can see, the rear windscreen tapers gently toward the rear, where you get another set of full LED taillights, just like the non-plug-in hybrid models. However, here you get C9 badging in blue, as well as all-wheel drive PHEV badging on the other side, in order to denote the fact that you've bought the range-topping C9. Now, in terms of the overall design, I do think that this does look quite good. I have no issues with the design of the Omoda C9. I think this back end is very well resolved. I do like elements like the full-width LED taillight bar. I like the sort of pause design of the third brake lights. However, I do not like the fake exhaust tips here. There are 4 of them, which makes no sense, because not only does this car have a relatively small engine, but actually there are 2 exhaust exits behind the bumper anyway, which means that they could have just shot them straight through the bumper and then they wouldn't look fake. Now, one of the things I like about the Omoda C9 is that this is a D-segment SUV, which means that in terms of boot space, there is a lot of it. Behind this powered tailgate, you will find more than enough space for 5 people's worth of luggage, even with the tonneau cover in place, although this is very easily removed and retract. And once you have that moved out of the way, you can also fold the rear seats flat 60/40, and they fold completely flat, which means that you can use this as a very practical people mover or thing mover, should you so want to. One small area of compromise, however, comes in what's going on underneath the boot floor, because where we used to have a full-size spare wheel, now we get a lot of styrofoam in order to make room for this car's high voltage system that lives underneath the boot floor. There is, however, mercifully just enough room here in order to hide your 3-pin charging cable, which is very useful for this car because the battery is not that big, which means that if you're charging it overnight, you should be able to replenish this battery to full on a regular basis, which means that you don't actually need anything more than a 3-pin plug, but it is always nice to have. More importantly, because this tailgate is powered, it also comes with something called an induction tailgate or a sensor tailgate. So if you stand back here long enough, the car will beep and then the tailgate will open automatically without you having to use your hands. Although I generally find those systems quite irritating, and no matter how full my hands are, I can always just press the button. Now, the interior of the Omoda C9 PHEV is basically identical to that of the non-plug-in hybrid model, which means that you get lots of nice materials, lots of stitching, everything is soft touch, and it does feel decently high quality. And there are some items in here that also seem to be aping designs out of certain other car makers, like the seat controls, which I swear straight out of a Mercedes-Benz, as well as this sort of dual screen setup here, which again is out of the slightly more compact Mercedes-Benz models. That said, however, the interface of them, definitely not Mercedes-Benz. The reason for this is because the way it works is sort of like a bit hit and miss. Like, some people like it, some people don't. And the thing is, for the most part, I do think some of these things are quite irritating. So for example, if you try and get into the settings, you will see that these settings are not laid out in like the most sensible sort of way. You just get like endless menus and sub-menus for you to go through, and see the interface of it changes depending on which sub-menu you happen to be in, and so it's a bit confusing. But for the most part, I've just been using Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And so it does display on a full screen here, and it does seem to render quite nicely as well, so you can tell the graphics card behind this system is all pretty good. And overall, it does just seem to be a pretty usable, very sort of likable kind of system to work with. This also works in concert with the instrument cluster here, which is also fully digital. Now, in terms of the design, again, it's very similar to what we've seen before from the C9 non-PHEV, and it gives you all the information that you want, although, again, another area of frustration is the fact that it doesn't give you sort of a trip update in terms of consumption. It just gives you a consumption over the last 50 kilometers, which is useless given the fact that this car's all-electric range is triple that. You also get a full color heads-up display, which gives you your ADAS functionality, whatever, directly in your line of sight, which is nice to see. And overall, life in here is pretty good. However, there is one particular area where this car is different compared to that of the non-plug-in hybrid model, and that is this dial here. Now, in the non-plug-in hybrid model, this is already a mode selector, which means that as you turn this, it will change into the various different
normal mode,
modes,
eco mode,
and announce itself, which I find very irritating. But more importantly, this in the middle here has now become a button, so you can actually choose between EV and HEV modes depending on the state of charge. Although, If the battery SOC goes to about 20%, it will automatically knock itself into HEV. You don't have to do anything, the car will do it by itself, and it will try its best not to exhaust the battery beyond 20% or below 20% in order to ensure that you always have adequate performance available and the best fuel economy. But I digress. This car also comes with dual zone climate control, and you do get physical buttons for that. You control your fan speed on this side and you control your temperature on this side. Your demisters are actual buttons here, which is always nice, as well as your recirculation button here, as well as a couple of toggle switches for your air conditioning as well as your automatic functionality. Now, although this car comes with dual zone climate control, this knob only actually adjusts the driver's side temperature, which means that when you turn it, it brings up this screen, which overlays on top of your Apple CarPlay Android Auto. And so if you want to adjust the temperature on the passenger side or in the rear, you're going to have to fiddle around with these sorts of things. On top of that, if you want any of the additional HVAC functions that this car comes with, such as, for example, the seat ventilation, then unfortunately you're going to have to do it via this screen. And then once again, you have to kind of screw around with this. It's just not quite as nice as you might want, because it requires you to, again, manipulate the screen as much as possible. Now, this car also comes with a fragrance system, which is something that we've only really seen from truly higher end cars, and you can set it to whichever smell you might want, and it works automatically, so it'll spritz a little bit of fragrance within the car ever so often. But overall, I do find that this is just not the nicest interface in the world, simply because dismissing it, for example, takes a little bit longer than you might expect. So for example, if I adjust my air conditioning now, I'm just going to leave this here so you can watch how long it takes to get rid of itself. You have a wireless charging pad here, as well as a card holder or phone holder space here, where I've been just putting my access cards. You have a couple of cup holders here, as well as a central storage bin, which is lined in felt, which is anything that you put in here isn't going to rattle about. That's good. But you can actually lift the base to reveal even more space underneath, so you can actually hide stuff in here. Although now that I've told you, I suppose it's not very well hidden. Now, if you press this button here, you will reveal a relatively large center console area with rubber lining at the bottom, as well as an air conditioning vent, which means that anything that you put in here will stay pretty cool, which is very nice. Decently sized door bins, big enough for a liter sized bottles with some space behind that. Floating center console space underneath, where you will find the fragrance canisters down there, as well as USB-C, USB-A, and 12-volt sockets. And you get a decently sized glove box here, which is lined in felt, which means that once again, anything that you put in there is not going to rattle about. That's all well and good. In terms of adjustment, both of these seats are electrically adjustable and lined, upholstered rather, in leather. You get memory functionality for the driver, as well as lumbar adjustment, which is nice to see. And on top of that, you also get an electrically adjustable steering column, just like a proper luxury car. Now, the benefit of this is also the fact that if you have your seat memory working, if you just press a singular button, it will recall all the necessary settings. So if you share this car with a spouse, for example, you'll be able to get all of your mirror adjustment, your steering wheel adjustment, as well as your seat adjustments just right, without having to press any more buttons than strictly necessary. That's all very good. Now, the steering wheel itself is very nice to hold, wrapped in leather. You do get sort of touch-sensitive buttons on either spoke, which is less than ideal, but at least it does feel very clicky. This screen also helps to display your 360-degree camera. This car also offers automated parking, although it's a bit clunky, so I wouldn't use it. And more importantly, everything just works in a pretty reasonable enough fashion in terms of the way everything operates. You also get your wiper controls here on the stalk, whereas your light controls live down here, where, mercifully, there are also physical controls for your wing mirrors. Thank the Lord. Now, beyond that, you do get a centrally dimming rear view mirror, electrochromic, which means that you never get blinded. And up here, you also get your physical controls to control this car's panoramic sunroof, which is always nice to see. One small thing that I would like to point out is the fact that this car does not offer base angle adjustment for the seat, so you do have to sit quite high in order to enjoy any degree of under-thigh support, but you do have adjustable under-thigh support, so it rolls out to the backs of your knees, so you do feel quite comfortable. And the view out of this rear view mirror is very compromised. As a result, this car's sloping roofline has a relatively shallow rear windscreen, which means that the view out the back is quite compromised, and this could have very easily been fixed via a digital rear view mirror. But that's not offered on any Cherry model at present throughout the entirety of the group, so I suppose that's just a part that they didn't have available. Now, in the back of the Omoda C9, life is pretty good. Like I mentioned, this is a D-segment SUV, which means that space is pretty generous. With the front seat set up in my driving position, about 170 centimeters, I have a pretty good amount of knee room and a pretty good amount of headroom, despite this car's standard fit panoramic sunroof, which means that life is pretty good. In addition to this, I also have plenty of foot space because the floor is completely flat, and because the front seats are mounted a little bit higher, I also have plenty of space to stretch out should I so want to. Other amenities back here include pockets behind the front seats, as well as decently sized door bins, big enough for a litre-sized bottle, as well as some pockets up here. And in terms of air conditioning, there is a single vent in the center console. I don't understand the Chinese obsession with this. However, in the Omoda C9, this is fine because in addition to this, there are also B-pillar-mounted air conditioning vents, which means that I have air conditioning blowing directly to my face, making me feel very comfortable indeed. Now, because space is so generous, I can actually sit quite comfortably like this. But more importantly, the Omoda C9 has another party trick, and that is for these two outer seats. In addition to offering the B-pillar mounted air conditioning vents that I mentioned earlier, this car also offers heated and ventilated second row seats, which means that as I'm sat here, I have nice ventilation keeping my back and my bum quite cool. On top of that, I also have electric adjustment for this backrest, which means that if I want to sit further upright, I can, or if I'd like to luxuriate in the back of the Omoda C9, I can do that too. In addition to this, I also have plane style headrest, which means that I can actually pull out these wings to hold my head in place so that if I was being chauffeur driven, for example, I could fall asleep without ending up looking like a buck leaning over the seat next to me. And there's also a centrally deployable center armrest here with a couple of cup holders, and it feels quite sturdy, which means that for adult passengers, life back here is pretty damn good. Now, beyond this, if you're looking at this as a bit more of a family car, you'll appreciate the fact the ISOFIX mounts are relatively easy to locate, and because this car has a relatively long wheelbase, fitting a bulky rear-facing child seat should not be any issue whatsoever. However, if you do have younger children, you will have to note the fact that the rising window line on this car does mean that the view out is relatively compromised. So if you have a very young child, for example, they may be slightly more prone to car sickness as a result of not being able to get a good view out. Furthermore, the bulky design of the front seats also means that your forward visibility is relatively limited, which means that the only real solution at that point is to open the panoramic sunroof. If you are trying to carry 3 adults back here, that shouldn't be so bad because this car is quite wide and the central seat is not overtly raised, which means that it doesn't compromise that much in terms of headroom. But overall, I think the back end of the Omoda C9 is a relatively positive place to be. The material quality is just good as it is in the front. You still get stitching, you still get ambient lighting, you still get the sort of metal speaker grills that you get in the front as well. And it's just nice. I have no complaints back here at all, aside from the fact that maybe this black upholstery or black interior colorway is a bit dark. But that aside, I have no real complaints here. And that sentiment actually continues to the driver's seat, believe it or not. Now, the Omoda C9 has never exactly been a bad car to drive. It's just that being very Chinese, it's always been a bit soft and a bit floaty, even though this is meant to be the sportier sibling next to the more upright and luxurious Jayco J8. Despite that bent, this car has never really been particularly sporty by any measure. But I think that what I recall of driving the C9 Turbo previously, one of the things that I didn't quite like about it was the powertrain, because that 2-litre 4-cylinder turbocharged engine, while it was certainly very powerful, and the 8-speed automatic gearbox was certainly very smooth, it wasn't exactly a very efficient pairing, which meant that no matter what you did, that car would do about 11 to 13 litres to the 100 if you're not careful. And if you drive out in town, it gets even worse. And so I lamented at the time that the car presented itself very well. It appeared to be a very smooth operator, but the powertrain was what let it down. Now, getting into this, it is like night and day, because obviously the biggest change with the C9 PHEV is the PHEV system. So now that this utilizes essentially the same configuration as what we saw from the J7 SHS, where the engine works primarily as a generator, but also secondarily as driven, or rather motor driven directly to the wheels, this car feels much smoother. Now, most of the time when you're driving about at urban speeds, or when you aren't requesting that much torque from the powertrain, all of your twist actually comes from the single rear-mounted electric motor, which in and of itself produces in excess of 300 Newton meters of torque. So even when you're driving in all-electric mode, this car feels very punchy. Which means that when you're driving about like this, or if you're on, say, a slightly busy motorway and you want to change lanes or merge into traffic or whatever, this car always has more than enough twist in order to get you into that gap and exploit the best use of that space. But of course, the moment you request any more torque from this powertrain, that's when it will kick in the front electric motor, giving you all-wheel drive. Now, when that happens, the amount of torque that this car provides almost immediately is incredible. Now, I say this because this is a relatively large, very heavy SUV, and from behind the wheel, you can tell that this is a big, heavy SUV. There's no running away from that. But the way this car picks up speed really belies the weight of this vehicle. It makes you believe that this is something a lot smaller, a lot sprightlier. It makes you think you're driving a Jayco J7. And as a result, Omoda Jayco's claims that the C9 will go 0 to 100 in 4.9 seconds, I believe them. Because based on my experience with this car so far, it's at no point left me squandering. It's just always gotten up and gotten going with a certain degree of agility and willingness that is just, I can't believe that you can do that in a car this big, because it is huge. Now, that is at urban speeds with the battery powered up. I have had the misfortune, perhaps, of driving this car around with a flat battery because I think the car was given to me with basically 20% SOC, meaning that the car was not really able to drive itself on electric power alone. And driving around with the petrol motor sort of kicking in, providing enough power to the battery to feed the electric motors and so on, it still felt very pokey because I was still getting 100% of the performance from the rear electric motor. And because this car utilizes a 1.5 litre rather than, say, the 2 litre this car used to come with, or a larger engine, for example, to work as a generator, it means that in this application, that 1.5 litre is mounted, or it feels like it's mounted very far away from the cabin. So even when it does come on, you barely hear it, you barely feel it in here. And more importantly, because of the way it works with its own 4-speed dedicated hybrid transmission, it doesn't jerk, it doesn't rattle the cabin in any way, it doesn't feel uncomfortable at all as the engine chimes in and out of use. On top of that, the way this car moves the power around from rear motor to both motors to engine as well as motors, or even sometimes just the engine alone when you're driving at particularly high speeds on the motorway, it's imperceptible. The power just shuffles around. All you know is the car is consuming next to nothing in fuel, and you have a lot of power available under your right foot. Now, in terms of refinement, in town, like I'm doing now, life is pretty much okay. Despite the fact this car runs on 20-inch alloy wheels, road noise is very well suppressed, and wind noise is basically non-existent. Plus, because this car has dual laminate glass all the way around, it means that even when there are bikes going past you, for example, you don't really hear them at all, which is nice. It means that, again, this cabin remains very serene, very comfortable. It is more akin to the experience of driving a Mercedes-Benz E-Class compared to that of a Honda CR-V, which is very impressive, again, given the fact that this car is only just a little bit over 200,000 ringgit. But of course, once speeds pick up, especially when you have a car like this which will claim to do well over 1,000 kilometers in a full tank and a full charge, road trips are going to likely be something that C9 PHEV owners will be prioritizing. And so high-speed refinement is also very important. And to that end, this car performs very well. Once again, road noise remains very, very, very muted, and wind noise doesn't really present itself until you are dangerously north of the national speed limit. Let's leave it at that. Which means that when you're driving along and just covering distance and trying to make a destination that might be 400, 500, 600 kilometers away, this cabin just feels really comfortable. You're happy to sit here and cover the miles, and you can do so in pretty good comfort. Add to that the fact that these cars come with ventilated seats in 4 seats, not just the 2 front seats. It also means that your passengers as well as the driver will be pretty comfortable in order to do that distance. It's just nice. Now, one of the things that is also quite nice is the fact that the sound system in this car is pretty good, and because this car is relatively quiet, even at higher speed you'll still be able to enjoy your music quite well. You have your Android Auto and Apple CarPlay displaying nicely on your screen, well within your line of sight. Everything just falls easily to hand. It's just nice to be in this car. What isn't so nice, however, is this car's advanced driver assist features. Now, on paper, the Omoda C9 PHEV has everything that you'd want it to have. Traffic jam assist, AEB, ACC, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, rear safety exit alert, blah blah blah, whole 9 yards, right? In fact, earlier you might have heard the alarm go off as a bike tried to go past, because that's your rear collision warning going off. So again, on paper, everything looks good. However, in the real world, it's not quite so smooth sailing. The primary reason for this is because this car's adaptive cruise control has, once again, not been properly tailored for our market. As a result, the follow distance is incredibly far, and while the car doesn't jump on the brakes whenever it gets cut off the way it used to, the way it did in the Omoda C9 Turbo, or in fact in the Jayco J7, that's better. But the way it accelerates is still a bit too brisk. It makes it slightly uncomfortable, and it does still like to slow down in corners when you have the adaptive cruise control on. Now, I'm not sure how the roads are set up in China, But in Malaysia, we can actually usually, at least on the North-South Highway, for example, carry a decent amount of speed through corners, so it doesn't require or necessitate ridiculous amounts of slowing down. And more importantly, when you do slow down, when you do need to scrub speed, you want to do so in a smooth and linear fashion, not in a choppy kind of way like the corners come out of nowhere. Unfortunately, that's what this car is like when you have the adaptive cruise control on and you're trying to navigate twists and turns through our extensive motorway network. That I find truly very irritating. The other one that I cannot stand is this car's lane centering assist, because it is incredibly aggressive, so much so that every time I get in the car, I just switch it off. And bear in mind, I am not the sort of person that switches off safety features, because it's important for testing. I need to be able to tell you whether or not these systems work and how well they work if they do, which means I tend to leave these things on. But the lane centering assist in this car is absolutely infernal, and there is no way of living with it reasonably, at least not without it raising your blood pressure. Now, those two issues aside, the rest of this car still remains pretty good. So much so that if I had 200,000, 210,000 ringgit burning a hole in my pocket, I would probably quite happily live with one of these. Because the fuel consumption, for example, is brilliant. Being a plug-in hybrid, of course, 145 kilometers of all-electric range, which means that the majority of your little sort of day-to-day driving and whatever can be done on full electric power alone. But because I don't really have a routine like everybody else, it means that I've exhausted that, I've had to use the engine, and I've done quite a bit of distance in this car, and the consumption has been exceptional. So with only the ability to charge this car up like maybe once every couple of days or so, it's still reporting a consumption figure of about 5.2 liters to the 100 combined. Now, bear in mind that is including some charging, but mostly I've just been relying on the system to do its thing. I've only been able to charge this car when a charger is available to me, because I can't plug in at home. And as far as I'm concerned, for something that's offering north of 500 PS and north of 600 Newton meters of torque, with this kind of performance, with this kind of comfort, with this kind of specification, that is an incredible number. That's the sort of number that you would struggle to see even from a Toyota Corolla Cross, let alone something this big. And so to me, for 200,000 ringgit, or a little bit over 200,000 ringgit, it just feels like really, really good value. You're getting a lot of car for the money here, and you're getting a lot of performance for the money as well, without having to sacrifice all of your money on fuel. This seems like a pretty good balance to me. I have everything I want in here. Sure, there are some things that I would have preferred, like base angle adjustment for the seat, and perhaps slightly better adaptive cruise control, but these niggles are not enough for me to take away from the overall package, the overall appeal of the Omoda C9 PHEV. This is the Omoda C9 that should have debuted. They shouldn't have bothered with the turbo at all, because this car operates so much better than the turbo that the Omoda C9 all-wheel drive with a 2-liter turbo and the Omoda C9 2-wheel drive, pointless. Go straight past that and just buy one of these. Now, if you're in this space and you're looking for something that is about this size but has more seats, while still offering a similar amount of fuel efficiency, then of course Chery will also offer you the Tiggo 8 PHEV, which of course isn't going to be as plush as this, but it's also about 60,000 ringgit more affordable, which means obviously it's not as plush as this. But at least in terms of the way the powertrain works, etc., it is broadly the same thing, which means that you'll still be able to enjoy electric first mobility while still having the option and the comfort of a petrol generator up front should you need it. And then of course, if you're not fussed with any of this and you just want a large D-segment SUV that is comfortable and good looking and good to drive and is able to communicate a certain degree of success that you've attained in your life, but you can't be arsed with plugging in, or you don't like the Omoda badge for whatever reason, then of course there is also the Mazda CX-60, which is powered by a 2.5-litre naturally aspirated motor, which is very smooth, but not nearly as efficient as this. And of course, it's slightly more traditional mechanics should also prove to potentially be a little bit more durable over, say, the next 15 to 20 years if you're that kind of buyer. But very few people are, and given the fact that this powertrain was for a period covered by a 10-year warranty, I don't think Omoda JQ are particularly worried that these things are going to explode. So I don't see the issue. To me, I think within the D-segment SUV space, the Omoda C9 PHEV is perhaps one of the strongest contenders within the space. And I think that if you're shopping within this budget, within this price range, and within this size category, the Omoda C9 PHEV is definitely worth a look, if not worth shortlisting altogether. In any case, that concludes our review of the 2026 Omoda C9 PHEV all-wheel drive. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to notify every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. All the links are in the description below, including the link to join our new WhatsApp channel. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and jangan bodoh.